Well, in this video we'll be replacing the bearings and races in my 1992 Ford F150 four-wheel drive pickup truck. And as you can see, I've already got the hub and the bearings and the rotor off of the truck. So if you need to know how to get to this point, I've got another video that I did on ball joints, and you can watch the first part of that and it'll get you to this point. I'll post a link to that in the description. First things first, the outer bearing, which probably fell off when you took it off the truck, is right there in the front. There's nothing holding that in, so I can just dump it out. And the rear bearing is a little bit trickier. It's got a wheel seal on here, so what I'm going to have to do is pound out the bearing and the seal at the same time. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. I'm not saving these bearings, so I'm not worried about a bunch of dirt and crap getting in them. And I'm just going to go ahead and find the bearing in here and tap on it, drive it out along with the seal in the back. Just a couple of taps on each side, go back and forth so it pops out. There it is. There. Knock the seal out. Now what we have to do is to get this race out. It's kind of dirty in there. I'll wipe it down so you can see a little bit. But that race there looks something like this, and it's got a nice wide spot on the back. And we're going to tap it out just like we did the seal, except we're going to make sure to hit just on the edges of this. I'll flip it over and I'll do a couple of taps on each side. I'll just keep doing that until the race is out. Alright, now the race is out, as you can see. We can flip it over and do the other one the same way. And there we go, the other one's out. Now what I have to do, now that I've got the races out, is clean that up real good inside there, because it's an awful mess. Get all that old grease and crap out of there. Any dirt or grit or rust that fell in there, get it out now before we put the new races in. Alright, now that we've got this all cleaned up, and it's very important to clean it because anything that's left in there ends up in your bearings. But now that we've got that cleaned, we can open up our new bearing and pull the race out and install it. And it's very important when you're working with new bearings to have everything clean. Have your tools clean, your workbench clean, your hands clean. Obviously mine are not, because I do not care. But like I said, anything that ends up on here can end up in your bearings and can ruin them. So we'll just get our new race out of here, and we'll just plop that right in there. And now I have a race installer tool, which really makes it nice. But what I have done in the past is take one of the old races, clean it up, set it on there, and use that to tap on to get the race in. Another thing you can do that's not going to work with these ones because they're too big. I don't have any sockets this big, but you can get sockets, put them on there, and tap them in that way. But lucky for me, I happen to have a tool for driving these in. Works really well. So what I can do is just set that on there, grab my hammer, and make sure it's straight, and just slowly tap it in. And you'll hear it make a different sound once it's all the way in. So once you've got it all the way in, I usually just give it a few little taps to make sure that it's in. And there we go. I'm going to put the other race in, same way as I did this one, and then I'm going to go ahead and grease up the bearings, and then I can put the seal on. Alright, now that I've installed both the races, we can go ahead and pack our bearings full of grease. Now I've got a fancy bearing packer here, so I'm going to use that to pack them full of grease. But if you don't have one, you can always put a bunch of grease in the palm of your hand and either roll the bearing and make sure you get the grease inside these rollers, or I've seen people tap it. That works too. The point is just to get as much grease as you possibly can inside the bearing and not just smear it on the outside. So I'm going to go ahead and pack it with my my bearing packer here, and then we'll put her in. Alright, we've got our new wheel seal here, so we can just pop that on top. I usually just tap them down with a hammer. Sometimes it can be kind of tricky to get them to tap in evenly, but they usually eventually go. And then I usually take just a little bit of grease and wipe it around the seal there so it slides on real nice. Now I'll go ahead and pack some grease into the other one, and we'll be ready to throw this on the truck. Alright, here we are back at the truck. I've already gone ahead and cleaned the spindle off, and we're ready to throw the rotor and hub back on. Alright, I got the rotor and hub. Only the rear bearing is installed right now. I've left the front one out until we get the rotor and hub on. Alright, now that that's slid into place, I can grab the other bearing and stick it in there. Got the other bearing. There we go, other bearing's in. Now what we have to do is put in the nuts that hold the bearing in. Now my truck has two different nuts. One is smooth on both sides and the other one has this little peg sticking out of it. And I don't know how well you can see that, but there's a peg right there. Now that has to be facing outwards towards you when you screw this in. So I'm going to go ahead and screw this one in, get it started by hand. Alright, I've got it put in there by hand, and now it's time to torque it down. The torque specs in my book for my truck say that I need to torque it to 50 foot-pounds while turning the wheel back and forth. Yours may be different, so make sure to look up your specs. Now it's a little difficult because I have to have two hands with this one because it only has two prongs. It's a little difficult to spin the wheel while I'm torquing it, but it's good enough for now. Now the next step of the procedure is to actually back off this nut 90 degrees. So right about there. Now that we've done that, this washer has to go on, and this is why we need the peg sticking out towards us, because there's a keyway slot for this washer that locks it into place, and there's also that little peg that holds the nut where it's supposed to be. So let's see if we can get those lined up. There we go. I've got the peg in one of those holes and its slots lined up, so now we can go ahead and put the other nut on. Now I've got that other nut started on there. The spec for this one on my particular truck is 160 to, I think it was 210. Pretty much you get it really tight. But make sure to check the specs on your truck. They might be different. So now I'll go ahead and tighten that nut up. Alright, there we go. We got her torqued. It's very difficult with a two-prong socket to actually do that, but I managed to get her done. Now we're going to go ahead and throw the rest of the stuff in there. Alright, now that we've got our bearings in there and set, we can install our splined washer and the little clip that goes in there to hold it all in place. Fits into a groove inside of here. Now that we've got that in there, we can put our locker in. There we go. Now that we got that clipped into place, we can put our little clip in here. And now our little bearing and the seal. And now the cap with the spring. And there we go. It's all back together. Now you're probably screaming at me to clean up the grease on the rotor, and I will. So once I've done that and put the brakes back on, put it all together, she'll be good to go.